I wanted to see boats, so you took me to the sea. I felt like I could fly in this new sky you showed to me. Airplanes passed above us, so only I could hear when you whispered I love you so sweetly in my ear. These are the best days. These are the best days. Nighttime on an empty shore, foggy like my head, drifting off to sleep to all those silly things you said. Waking for a moment to say that we'd be fine. You hid your smile with one hand, and with the other you held mine. These are the best days. These are the best days. I actually played that last bit wrong. Anyway, so this is actually the latest that I'm recording a video in a while. Like it is very late. It's 9:45. And I mentioned before that, yeah, I usually record on this channel later, and it's basically just because I know I can. Although the funny thing is, I don't even know whether or not the lighting is worse like this. Again, I've always said that I prefer natural light because I think natural light seems like it should be the obvious right light. But it's also possible that, and that's why I record on like this channel, because I'm like, well, this channel is kind of like the channel where I don't, it's more casual. I don't really like worry about production values as much. Like I would happily still be recording on a crappy microphone with a rubbish webcam if I didn't have a good microphone and a good webcam for my main channel. I feel like that's a horrible thing to say, making this channel seem like an afterthought, but it's not really. It's just that I know, I mean, I've said it before, this is the channel that I have so that I can do stuff without even remotely stressing out about, like viability as a YouTube channel. Although I say that, I'm recording this on the very day when I uploaded my video on like basically the quote that changed my mind about feminism, which I think has been a somewhat controversial video. So anyway, let's talk about, I don't know if this is going to be controversial. Admittedly, it's a bit of a weird thing to say because as I'll get into, it kind of doesn't necessarily entirely relate to even a lot of what I actually believe. Okay, let's just jump in. So, university, it's kind of rubbish, right? It's kind of nonsense. It's kind of stupid. It's kind of the worst thing in Western society. It's kind of just this embarrassing mess of modern civilization. And you might think that I'm going to now rail against, I don't know, like all the postmodern subjects and, critical theory and whatever else, because, maybe that's the kind of thing you can imagine me doing. And certainly I imagine there are plenty of university subjects that are, in their own special ways, complete nonsense. But my issue is not so much with the syllabus, the curriculum, the sources that are supposed to be consulted, the literature. My issue is with the entire like conceit of university and how that is juxtaposed with reality. Because university is supposed to be the place where the great minds think and discuss important issues. It's supposed to be like, here's the thing. So at my university that I went to, particularly during my bachelor's, we had seminars, and seminars were supposed to be, you would all read the literature and then you would debate the literature. And they actually said, you will learn more in seminars than you learn in lectures. That's what they said. But the thing about the seminars is basically the seminars were supposed to just be the students conversing with each other. And what you quickly realized is that most students just like, it's not just this place where like these fantastic great minds that are purely motivated by their love for the extreme depths of academia come together. It's not, let's be honest here, the forums of ancient Greece. It's not the place where the few great bright minds of the country come together and discuss the issues that really matter. It's a place where a bunch of just people who are mostly there out of obligation just kind of try to bluff their way through a discussion about a book that they haven't really read or a topic that they haven't really understood. And the reality is that university has become an obligation now. It's become something which you just do because it's like part of your life. And also, there are certain jobs which, you need to do, even pretty jobs, which require you to have at least a bachelor's. So there are people who are just like, well, I might as well go to university. Does that sound like it's going to be the direct antecedent to somebody having a deep, meaningful discussion about the most important intellectual issues of our time? I might as well go to university. No. And the reality is lots of people are like, well, I find politics pretty interesting, so I'll do politics. Or I find history pretty interesting, so I'll do history. But are those people then going to be having these really deep, meaningful discussions about these topics? No, they're not. The reality is that university there are too many people going to university. And it's caused a situation where degrees are becoming less important. I remember a while ago, and I will link it because it's a video which I've now made unlisted because I just think it's, very detached from what I now talk about on that channel. But I made a video responding to Julie Borowski, who is a anarcho-capitalist or maybe just a regular libertarian. And she had a video basically talking about why university shouldn't be free because university degrees are becoming devalued. Like nobody values university degrees anymore because too many people go to university and therefore university shouldn't be free. You may notice this is a complete non sequitur because the reality is even if university costs lots of money, people might still go to university because they might view it to be a good investment. And conversely, you could have it so that university was free and you could just make it incredibly selective. No prizes for guessing which angle I might be considering viable. And that was basically kind of the thing which really bothered me about Julie Borowski's video. I was like, well, hold on a minute. That doesn't, I agree with the concept. I agree that university degrees should actually be a pretty significant distinction. To say you've been to university where the great minds discuss issues, it should mean something, but it doesn't mean that much because loads of people have been to university. Like too many people in this country have been to university such that to have gone to university is not a particularly meaningful distinction. And meanwhile, the cost of university means that, and this is of course where I depart from Julie Borowski, who argues that university should cost money because that will solve the problem of too many people going to university, apparently. Obviously, like Julie Borowski's logic makes no sense because also in Julie Borowski's mind, like university also it's like just something where if you have money, you go. So actually a really smart person who doesn't have money can't go, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, basically, the cost of university degrees, which, there is some cost in the UK, that cost is not as horrendous as it is in America. And also the kind of university debt thing, student debt is more kind of fairly handled in the UK. But the cost of university means that it enshrines and entrenches class division in our society, where you basically have loads of people going to university, but very few working class people going to university, and people like tradespeople, and people who maybe work in factories and things like that, like all sorts of kind of working class jobs. There's this idea that you don't need a university degree for those jobs, but then there's a huge amount of kind of middle class, middle management jobs where it's like you need to be a graduate. The reality is not every single person who's working in these middle class, middle management jobs really should be going to university. They don't really have much reason to want to go to university. It's not as if like they have this intense passion for academia or something like that. But they need to so they can get this middle class job that pays a decent amount. And obviously what it creates is this idea that like there's certain jobs which are for smart university educated people and certain jobs which aren't. And that of course further, entrenches lots of ideas of class, and I'm against it. So, okay, let's talk about solutions, because we don't just come here for problems, we come here for solutions. And this is the solution. So first of all, step one, make it so there's like 10 universities in the country. Not 100, which there are over 100 universities in the country. No, 10. 10 quite selective, about, let's say, as selective as they are now, universities. And that's it. Well, no, sorry, that's not the only solution, but I'm just saying, like, that's a very kind of like big thing that I'm saying, but I think we should do it. There should be 10 universities in the country, not huge amounts of universities to accommodate the huge number of people who are going to university just as an obligation. 10 universities. I think that's enough to accommodate the people who will actually really make something of university. And step 2 is make them free. And obviously, that's kind of obvious. I already kind of gave away. That's my opinion. I don't think there should be any cost associated with university, even like an offset cost of like student loans or something like that. Because of course, the other thing with student loans, actually, while I'm at it, is the entire logic of student loans is that it's an investment, that university is an investment. Like, you pay student loans so you can go to university, but then you'll make more money in the long term so you can pay those loans back. So, it's not as if you're just throwing money down a well. Obviously, the problem there is it's, again, establishing this idea that if you're making more money, it means you should be more educated. And I don't like that association. I think that association is contrary to my fierce, strict Marxist values. So that's my take. And then step 3, and this is the most important one, make them awesome. Because there's one thing we all regret in life, and it's that we didn't get into Oxford or Cambridge. And it's not really for any other reason than that Oxford and Cambridge seem kind of awesome. Like, they have like all the kind of antiquated buildings. Like, okay, so here's the thing. I went to an all-right university. I'm fine telling you what university I went to. I went to the University of York. But the thing about University of York is it even though York itself is a very old town, as you probably know, the University of York was built in like the 60s. It's like concrete buildings, glass buildings. It's not like some kind of awesome university. It's pretty ugly. And I kind of think to myself, I was a way away from kind of getting into Oxford or Cambridge. But, the one thing, I think it's kind of a situation where I could have. Like, if I would have really pushed myself and applied myself. To be fair, I actually think that like a very, very massive proportion of the population, if they really applied themselves, could get into Oxford. That's my firm belief. I actually don't think that there is really such a thing as like innate gifts. I think that actually, I do think there's some kind of innate variability, but I think people, even who, might otherwise be in like the lowest rungs of society, if you like, could, if they really applied themselves, get up to really high areas. That's kind of my belief. But basically, the main reason I regret not having got to Oxford or Cambridge is because, I recently went to Oxford and kind of walked around the university areas and thought, well, this is just beautiful. It's so cool. And of course, what are we all thinking? It's like Hogwarts. In fact, actually, we went into, when you walk around Oxford University, something that you see quite a lot is, not too much, but quite a lot is like different plaques telling you what Harry Potter scenes were filmed there. Because, shock horror, lots of Harry Potter films were filmed in the old buildings of Oxford and Cambridge, because Harry Potter's set in an old castle school. Although, really, is it a castle? That's a question which I know that Shadowverse is covered, and I can't remember what side he actually came down on. But I'm pretty sure it's technically not a castle. It's just a very big stone building, and that's not what defines something as a castle. Anyway, so basically, what I mean is Hogwarts. I mean somewhere where it's like, wow, this like somewhere that inspires awe. Parthenon level. Like basically, a university should be like a world wonder level achievement. It shouldn't just be some kind of functional thing. It shouldn't be something where it's just like, oh, we'll just put up some buildings so that people can go there and just, go to class. It should be like, no, this is a place where the people who just really excelled academically and want to excel academically and have that intense interest in academia, where those people can go, and it needs to celebrate the specialness of being in university. And the way you do that is by, having like castle, like a castle, possibly even nicer than Oxford or Cambridge, but like this idea of it should be aspirational. Because here's the thing, okay, the actual buildings of York University, there's nothing aspirational about it. In fact, the funny thing is that I then went to a considerably lower ranking university for my master's, and it was actually centered around an old church. Just happened to be centered around an old church, which means that actually I considered having gone to that university more aspirational than going to York. It's like York was a much higher ranking university, but do I want to go to the ugly building with like gross concrete and like glass panes and all that kind of stuff? Or do I want to go to the university that's like got a view down upon an old churchyard? It was much prettier. But the point is, yeah, it should be aspirational, of course. Yeah, going to most universities, the idea of actually going to the building itself is not particularly significant. Of course, yeah, the big exception to that is some of the old universities of Europe, and obviously Oxford and Cambridge, two classic examples. But yeah, I think we should have 10 universities, and these 10 universities should be, I mean, first of all, in and of themselves, like tourist attractions. Like people should want to go see these universities because they should be so incredible. But also, yeah, it should be a place where, of course, people have some inspiration to want to go there. And basically, with all of this said, the people who go to these universities should be like the best, incredible. And they should be the people who really, really want to study hard and discuss these issues. And they're not motivated by the idea that this is just something you should do. Like, oh, I might as well go to university. It should be like, I'm going here because I really do want to discuss these topics, understand these topics, engage with this academia and this literature. It should be for really serious people. And I think that would dramatically improve the quality of the cohort at these institutions. And I do have a sincere thing, which is one of the reasons why you may be wondering, well, why am I saying it should be so nice? Why am I saying these universities should be so awesome? And one of the reasons is because I think people need to be, basically universities should be as detached as possible from the idea that they get you a better job. And I think one of the ways you can solve that problem is by making there be other aspects of university because I mean, the reality is, of course, that universities should be valuable because an education should be in and of itself intrinsically valuable. But I kind of think in our sort of money-minded world, that's not necessarily likely to work. I think the reality is people need some kind of extrinsic reason to like something. And that's one of the reasons why I say, well, it should just be luxurious. Like it should be the kind of thing, like if it was a hotel, it should be a hotel you would spend £1,000 to spend a night at, like it should be that kind of level of nice. Because then it's obviously not so kind of capitalist minded, just saying, well, you go to university to get a better job, but it's a little bit more kind of in line with people's materialist thinking with it. Well, it's a nice place. It's a physically nice place to be at, which is kind of moving them in the direction of like away from just the capitalist mindset. And similar to that, very much similar, is I was actually thinking maybe even that people who excel at university should get basically just free money. Just like there should be kind of like maybe an extra £5,000 a year, or maybe even just an extra £1,000 a year. I mean, first of all, I think it should be paid for being at university while they're at university. But secondly, yeah, maybe even after they've succeeded at university, this idea of you just get whatever money it is you earn after you leave university, you get an extra £5,000 on top of that. And this is, of course, something which actually could be covered by, as I already mentioned, the fact that these universities could be tourist attractions in themselves. Like these could be such fantastic. I mean, how many people go to the Parthenon, all that kind of stuff. Like these could be really impressive places that people go to. And yeah, maybe these universities would be able to make enough money to, do this. But basically, one of the reasons for this, okay, is first of all, it kind of creates this idea of it's having the education in itself that's intrinsically valuable, because it's not like, well, you go to university so you can get a job that pays you more money, but rather it's you go to university so you can directly get money. It's kind of attaching a bit more directly to that idea of the education. But the other reason is because this would, I think, work to encourage working class people to go into university more. Because I think one of the things which I've realized, overcoming kind of the class disparity in this country is something I'm very conscious of. And something I really do care about quite a lot. And one of the things I've actually thought in the past is like this idea that certain students who, let's say are, however we're going to kind of define class, working class, who go into certain jobs or pursue certain careers, like for example, STEM was mostly what I was thinking, should, even when they're at the school level, like get a little bit of extra money. Like I was kind of, it was an idea which I was like just throwing around. I don't think it would ever actually work in practice, but kind of like the idea of like, if a student picks like science for their, like their GCSEs, then even as a student, they get just cold hard cash because of that. And the reason I was thinking about it is because I recognize that I think working class people don't tend to think or have as much of this idea of like you do something as an investment. And the reason for that, it makes sense because lots of working class people live like paycheck to paycheck. They're not earning money with a mind towards that money being around 10 years down the line. That's a big difference between middle class and working class, I would say. Like middle class people are earning money with an idea of like that money still in some way doing something for them 10 years down the line, maybe earning passive income or something like that. Whereas, and also I should clarify, I'm not an American, right? Like I actually think the distinction between working class and middle class matters. I feel like lots of Americans who like have this idea that almost like the entire country in America is like middle class. That seems to be the logic everybody has. No, for me, a middle class person has like serious amounts of income. But yeah, basically, I think lots of working class people have this idea of they need an immediate financial benefit from something. And I think that makes sense. I think obviously, yeah, psychologically, if you've grown up in a household where your parents are living paycheck to paycheck and stuff like that, then the idea of going to university, even if it's free, even if you're getting paid to go to university, you might still think, yeah, but like, I want to be making kind of, like I want to get into a career right away or whatever else. And the point is that I think, therefore, you should have a system where it's like you get direct cold hard cash. And I think that's more likely to, again, further encourage working class people to pursue academia. And I think that's important because I think we need to get to a point where this association between this idea of like, yeah, there's certain jobs for smart people just needs to go away. We need to get to a point where it's just like, even if you want to be a plumber, or you want to be a investment banker, that shouldn't affect whether or not you can study 3 years of philosophy or whatever. Like there's no reason why either of those jobs should have a greater association with taking, like academic pursuits seriously. That's my take. And I think, yeah, to encourage somebody who maybe comes from the background of a plumber to actually take doing philosophy for 3 years, for reasons totally unrelated to the idea of a job, for reasons totally unrelated to a career, essentially, in essence, totally unrelated to work, because of course they're working class, to encourage them to think, well, this isn't related to work, but you should still do it. One of the ways to do that would be to say you get a big fat bonus from doing it financially. But the main point here is, and this is what I really want to stress, having a degree should be, if it offers any kind of financial benefit at all, it should be a direct financial benefit. And having a degree should not in any way affect your employment prospects. Having a degree, a university degree, should be irrelevant to employment. And, I'd almost want to make it so it can't be mentioned. Like you can't even mention whether or not you've had a degree. But I think that'd be kind of difficult because you'd have a situation where like people are like, oh, I see you weren't doing anything for 3 or 4 years during this period. So you'd either have to like make something up. Like you kind of end up in a weird situation. So I think more likely would just be to say that discriminating when it comes to employment based on a university degree should be as taboo as discriminating based on race. Like it shouldn't, certainly no job offer should ever say we require that somebody, has a university degree. There shouldn't be a job in the country that says you need to have a university degree to do this job. Every single job should be available to everybody. And yeah, having a university degree should be irrelevant to any kind of job you should do. And yeah, again, you can kind of, I don't need to stress why it is, but I believe that you can kind of have already worked this out. But, I also think, you might say, well, if you have two people with, sit down for a job interview, obviously people are going to pick the one with the degree. But I think basically the kind of mechanisms to safeguard against that should be pretty much, kind of the same mechanisms we have to, see whether or not there is discrimination in other aspects. Obviously, if somebody's discriminating based on race, they're not going to outright say, I'm discriminating against you based on race. So you kind of have to just work out that that's what they're doing. And I think the same thing should apply here. But yeah, I think it should definitely be very taboo. And we should just have this idea, no, yeah, the university thing, you go to university because you care about academia, because knowledge is valuable, education is valuable, and you as somebody who excelled in academia and education recognize the value of that. It has nothing to do with what job you're going to do once you've left university. And I think it's pretty obvious that this change solves the main two issues I have, which is one, the fact that university is no longer taken seriously as an institution of learning. Actually, genuinely, just if you could have sat in on any of the seminars I had during my time at university, you would very quickly discover that it was not a place of just ceaseless enthusiasm for, the nitty-gritty of academia or something like that. It was, of course, people who were there because it's just an obligation. It's just a thing you're supposed to do. And I think that's a problem. I think that is university departing from what university should be. And of course, the second issue is, like I say, the class division. I think it's pretty obvious how this is an issue that through lots of the changes I'm mentioning could be solved. So I should point out, of course, that you might say, well, what about when higher education is necessary for a job? Because I'm saying there shouldn't be any job where a university degree is necessary. But here's the thing, okay? What I want to stress is I think there should be lots of other forms of higher education which aren't university. And the reality is that when we talk about higher education that might be necessary for a job, what we're actually talking about there is training. I don't think somebody who wants to be a doctor should go to university to study medicine. What I think is somebody who has a genuine academic interest in medicine should go to university to study medicine. If you have a genuine academic interest in medicine, go to university to study medicine. And that should be, and this is my hot take, irrelevant to whether or not you then go on to be a doctor. It's like, oh, you have an academic interest in that topic. Again, this is what I hate. This idea of academic interest in this thing translates to you go do that thing. That's your role in society. That's your job. Like cog in a machine. You have interest in this, you go do it. No, if you have a genuine academic interest in medicine, study medicine. It's quite likely that you will then go on to be a doctor, but that you doing that should in no way should not be seen as automatically relating to you going on to be a doctor. And what I believe, of course, is that instead of having it so it's a university degree that you need to do in order to become a doctor, you instead do training. And the reality is that any training that is necessary for a job should be paid labor, first of all. And lots of jobs have some degree of training. Usually it's often like just 12 weeks. But if it's a very involved job, it should maybe involve years of training, and that should be paid labor that you're doing, paid for by the company. Now, obviously, a lot of the time, this might actually end up being covered by the state because a lot of very skilled labor is actually often part of the public sector. So, for example, the NHS in the UK obviously is in charge of doctors. So essentially, I think the NHS should get a lot more money than it's currently getting, and basically be training doctors who basically didn't go to university. Like somebody who wants to be a doctor comes straight out of education. I was going to say it's kind of like mandatory education, as the way that like the UK education system works is a bit weird with like the whole sixth form thing. But I'm just going to say mandatory education. They come out of mandatory education, and then they just go start training as a doctor. And that training is paid for by the NHS. And I mean, if there are private companies that want to also start employing doctors, they also should pay to train those doctors. But that's the point. The companies that are relying on this labor are paying for it, and they can go do that until they're ready to actually start working. Of course, it's the same thing for education. Rather than going to university to do a degree to teach you how to teach you to work in education, no, you start training as a teacher, paid for by the school or whatever. And, also probably kind of the same thing for criminal justice. Like, obviously you need to go to a law school, but no, not law school. Basically, and I'm not saying, you can have you can have something like a law school, but that law school would be paid for by whoever it is that's the beneficiary of having educated lawyers. And in this case, I think it would be the state, because I think the state obviously often provides lawyers to people. And the thing is, if a private venture that tries to make profit for a company or whatever else requires substantial amounts of training, then the company procuring those skilled workers should be the company paying for that training, rather than that training being subsidized by either the worker or the public. Basically, if you're benefiting from having skilled workers in your company, you pay for it. And I even think that, let's say, for example, a doctor is working in the NHS, gets their training paid for by the NHS, and then moves to a private company. I think that the private company should be obligated to reimburse the NHS. So basically, if somebody gets trained working in the public sector, then they get, a private sector company wants to employ them as part of, if you like, kind of the wages that person's getting. It should also include whoever it was that did train train the individual, getting reimbursed for that training. And obviously you could say reimbursed a diminishing amount depending on how long they've been working for them. But yeah, I think that would be a good system. And again, it establishes this idea that if your job is your job. It's not, and university is university, education is education, your job is your job. And if your job needs training, that's part of your job. It's not part of your education that's just single-mindedly focused towards getting you to start doing your job. No, education and professional jobs are separate things, and never the twain shall. Is that a phrase? I don't know if that's right. But anyway, they won't mix. Now, the thing I should also mention very briefly but significantly is that there should be significant opportunities for self-learning. And I do say this, kind of briefly, because I actually have a lot of opinions about this, which I'll probably divulge at other points. Education policy is actually something that I'm, if I could be in charge of one part of the government, because for me, I would choose all of it if given the opportunity. But if someone said, no, you can only be in charge of one part, I would say, all right, you know what, education. But yeah, basically, I have my opinions about it. But in general, I think that remote education and kind of like education, you can almost just do sort of very on the fly, very kind of mobily, is that really versatile, I guess, and kind of casually should be, just a much more significant part of our education and a much more legitimate way to get genuine kind of qualifications in education. So basically, while only kind of a select few people will go to university, and university will have that very significant thing, anybody can do kind of like basically get a university degree by doing it casually on the side. And I should also say, of course, people at university can also do other, it could be, for example, if you go to university to do theology, but then you can actually do other courses on the side. And these other courses would be self-learning. And, I think, for example, for language and maths, you can kind of have programs. Obviously, there's things like Duolingo for language. There's, at least when I was at school, there's a thing called Smart Maths. And it was basically like a website where you kind of did like maths problems. Yeah, I think those things could be, like that. And then obviously for other things, we have like the Great Courses Plus. I know that's like a thing that exists. But yeah, basically online lectures. And the idea is that you could basically do the university course online casually. And yeah, that is obviously, like I say, something I will touch on a bit more later on. But again, it's something you just kind of do because education's good. Now, I will say in this case, actually, there is an argument for it being part of your CV, like something you could add to a job application. And the reason for that is because it's something you're doing extra. It actually speaks towards greater dedication. So it's like, oh, while I was doing my job as, a waiter or something, I was also learning about ancient Roman history. And at that point, people go, oh, well, this person clearly has dedication. This is clearly a hard worker. So maybe this is the kind of person. Whereas, of course, conversely, if somebody says, obviously there's an appreciable difference between two people who work as waiters, one of whom goes home and basically just lazes around the whole time versus the other of whom goes home and actually works hard. Why I don't think university degrees should matter is because that's degrees that you're doing instead of working. So you're not showing any greater merit by going to university. However, if you went to university and also did extra work in addition to university, then again, that's something that should be, worthy of merit. So basically, I don't think that there are jobs which are more valuable than other jobs. Any job which is necessary for society is equally valuable, and if it takes equal amount of time. However, if you start doing extra work, more work than necessary, then you are demonstrating increased merit. So I think an investment banker who works 9 to 5 and a cleaner who works 9 to 5, or a garbage person, a rubbish man, bin man, that's the word we use in the UK. And a bin man work 9 to 5. They both work 9 to 5. As far as I'm concerned, equal in value, should be earning equal amounts, should be regarded with equal esteem, all that kind of stuff. But if if one of them then goes on to not only do that, but also do something else on the side, whatever it is, maybe they work at a homeless shelter or whatever, like they're doing something else of value in addition, then they're demonstrating that they are doing more, they're going above and beyond. So that's kind of my take, and that's why I think that, actually, if you're working as a plumber, but also on the side you're doing a philosophy degree, then that is more worthy of merit than somebody who's at Oxford University, in this scenario, just doing a university degree in philosophy or whatever I said, but that's it. That's all they're doing. Nothing else. Because obviously, in the former case, you are demonstrating more commitment, more kind of willingness to work hard, a greater work ethic. I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind. And and I think that would also really help society, because it means that there is a benefit, of course, to working hard to try and get yourself into those universities, but, because, they're pretty fab, but obviously you are still getting benefits, and there's still kind of an encouragement of everybody, pursuing education, even outside of that. Now, there is a final point to consider, which is, I've said all of this stuff about university, but I'm ignoring a significant thing, which is university life. Like, one of the main reasons I think people go to university, I've kind of been all down on capitalism. Why don't I ease up on capitalism and give capitalism a break for once? The reality is there's another reason people go to university that's not academic. It's not because they genuinely love academia and being intellectual. And it's also not because they want to get a job that's good. It's because they want to socialize. They want the university lifestyle. And to be fair, when I went to university, I did like the fact that it was kind of a bit like being at school. Like, I saw all of my friends and all that kind of stuff. And, I do kind of think about the fact that now I'm not at university, and it's not the same. I don't, you just don't have like all your buddies around you that you can just see on the regular. And here's the thing. If the university experience is something that is valued outside of kind of an academic context, then I say lean into it. And what I think we should have is a situation where you kind of have like, I don't really know what the word, this sounds sinister, but camps for young adults. And the idea is that essentially it's just like university, except it's not got the focus on academia. Rather, the main focus on it is you kind of get a lot of the benefits you get at university. So you, for example, share a house, a dormitory with lots of people. You kind of get all the friends. You have the nightlife. You could even have like a kind of, let's say, you have students union. Instead, in this case, it wouldn't be students union. It would just be like young adults union, and it would organize all these different things. It's basically a place to get that same social experience of university, and also some of the financial benefits. Like, I think living in dormitories would be cheaper. I also think maybe you could make an argument for allowing people to take out student loans, which again, in the UK, student loans actually are offered on very favorable terms, especially compared to other loans. So basically, people can leave university, leave mandatory school, and go live in these camps, in these dormitories with other students, and they can take out this loan. So they've got some money to play around with, and they can go out and drink and do all the fun stuff. Now you might say, well, hold a minute, this sounds like it's a pretty good deal. Like, so no education, no nothing. It's just about this. But here's the thing, okay? As I've already mentioned, they can do casual university courses. While they're there, the point is it's not a university. It's a dormitory. I think dormitory is better than camp. It's a residential area for young adults where they hang out together, and there's no expectation. It's not as if like, oh, you're going to the residential area for young adults. What are you going to study there? It's like, well, that's not what it's for. But you can do courses on the side, casually, whatever courses you want to do, to kind of build yourself up. But a big part of it, I maintain, should actually be working. As crazy as it sounds, I think. The reason I say it's crazy is because I've razzed work before. I've said, work, it's not this big thing. It shouldn't be this thing that really matters. And to an extent, I'm saying this more applies in our current system. In our current system of society, where work is a big thing and unemployment is a big concern, this matters more. But again, as I've said in the past, I think I said it in the private kitchens video, I don't think that work shouldn't be a thing. Maybe that's a way in which I'm not properly a communist. But I actually believe that waged labor should exist. I just think that it should be something which takes up, I think we should get rid of this kind of idea we have in our society that wage labor should be 9 to 5, 5 days a week, something which you really kind of like do a huge amount or commit yourself a huge amount to. But yeah, certainly within this current society we have, because I like to keep things reasonable. I'm not suggesting totally restructuring everything. We say, what, okay, yeah, you go to these I need to give them a name, because obviously it's not university. I could call it college because we don't really have that. Well, we do kind of have that as a thing in the UK. It has college has loads of meanings in the UK. Actually, it's a bit weird because I know in America, like, you guys use college. I don't know why I'm saying you guys. There's a very good chance you're a non-American watching this. But yeah, I know that lots of Americans use the word college to just mean university, and UK means all sorts of different things. Yeah, I'm gonna call it job camp, work camp. Oh, that sounds good, doesn't it? So you go to work camp, gulag. You go to the gulag, and basically the idea is that you go there, and it's like, okay, let's work on transitioning you to an adult, in effect. Basically, it's a place that kind of you go to as a young adult, and it's like, okay, what we're going to do is you'll have like kind of a careers officer there, and they will kind of say, all right, what are you interested in? Like, and they'll kind of really help you find a job you'll actually enjoy. And also, they will kind of guide you to get that job, and they'll kind of set you up with like an apprenticeship or something like that, like something where, you're making good amounts of money, like entry level stuff. And the idea would be that, you're probably going to want to be trying to find an entry level job within your first year at this place. And the idea would be like after 3 years, which is kind of, your standard university course length, you are in a position where you're actually established in a career. And then the next thing would be, okay, let's try and get you a mortgage, or, not necessarily the next thing. But basically the idea would be that you go to this place and you essentially are set up rather than, because here's the thing, how does it work right now? People leave university and they go back to live with their parents and they try to find a job. They then get an entry-level job, and then maybe in several years' time, they might be able to afford a mortgage if they're lucky. That's the current system we have. Essentially, people leave university, in some sense, like losers. People leave university starting like, okay, now I've got to start trying to get a job, start getting a career. Whereas the way this system would work is you leave work camp with a job. You leave work camp potentially with a mortgage. The idea is that, you live in this dormitory where you have kind of like your rent and all that kind of stuff, but it's, affordable. You hang out with your friends, you have fun, you kind of work, maybe not even 9 to 5, whatever, it can be kind of very flexible, but, maybe you work 9 to 5. And then the idea is that you kind of, while you're there, you're establishing a relationship with this job. And when you actually leave university, it's like, okay, yeah, now it's time for you to transition properly into the work environment if you haven't already. And also, maybe even at that point, you're already making enough money. You've already got enough savings where it's like, yeah, you can put a deposit on a decent house. And the idea is, yeah, basically that rather than the current system, which is, I guess, like university is almost just a continuation of being a kid. You don't take, you're kind of just like, you're just continuing being at school, really. You don't really have too many of the adult concerns. And then you leave university. And to be honest, the adult world hits you like just as much of a brick as it would have if you left immediately after, if you start getting a job immediately after compulsory education, if not more intense, if not like a greater sense of just, oof, the real world. I almost wonder if university actually makes people less prepared for the real world. I think there's a very credible argument it does. So I do kind of think if university, aka like this kind of work camp dormitory thing, should have any purpose, it should be transitioning people to the real world. And that's what I think would be a good system. I know, yeah, it's kind of weird because, like I say, it's a very, it all sounds kind of dystopian. I get it. It sounds dystopian. A system where some elite group of people get to go off to these fantastic, beautiful universities while the majority of the population goes into these places called work camps. And they, just basically all live in these cramped concentration dormitories, and they just are set up to find a job, and then they're given that job, and then they're sent off. Yeah, okay, that sounds bad. But actually, here's the thing. Don't think about means. Think about ends. Because the ends justify the means. So think about what actually the society is, though. It sounds bad until you actually think about what it is that really we're talking about here. We're talking about a situation where people leave university, or again, leave that period of their life where university would have otherwise been. Not like, oh, I've got this bachelor's in some subject I didn't even care about, so that I can try and get a job, which I'm now going to struggle to get. And, like it's going to pay like £18,000 a year or whatever, not pay very much. And then I'm going to have to like maybe live with my parents for ages, or I'm going to have to rent, in which case I'm going to be just hemorrhaging money while trying to get enough money to put down a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's horrible. And you think about, this is the opposite. That actually, yeah, they leave university. Okay, yeah, I'm already established in a job, established in a career. I'm going to get a mortgage. Maybe I can change my career later on down the line. But right now, I'm cool, I'm casual, I'm calm. And meanwhile, of course, you have people who actually really care about university. They're in university and they are actually doing what university is for. These are the best people, the people who really care about academia, and they're talking about it, they're working out, they're thinking about it, they're really like getting involved. And then they leave actual university, and now they can kind of start to properly consider. And again, I mean, it is possible that they'll end up just in academia forever. That's also a perfectly legitimate avenue for them to go down. But yeah, then they will go and pursue whatever it is they're interested in. And of course, then you'll get the people who want jobs that are much more kind of involved, or not necessarily involved, but, require more training, in which case it's they leave compulsory education and they go into training. And of course, a lot of the time, actually, it should be pointed out, the people who are at the kind of, work camp places will be doing training. So they'll be kind of ready to start a job when they leave university. But yeah, that's kind of the point. Rather than people just being left in the lurch after they leave university, I think this system would work much better. I actually think it would make everybody very happy. So overall, in conclusion, I think that actually this is, it's one of those things where, I think my weird brain comes up with strange solutions to society. I think a world run by me would confuse a lot of people. I've always kind of thought like, if somebody were ever like magically transported into my world, they'd spend like so much time being like, wait, is this a dystopia or a utopia? Like, I think people would get really confused. I think it's because and I'm going to credit myself with this, really do think outside of the box in terms of the typical dystopia-utopia dynamic. And I think if you've seen like many of my videos on this channel, you'll agree with that. You think about my video on like private kitchens, like, you just, maybe for some people they're like, oh, hold on, so, everyone's just has to eat all together. They might think that's kind of like a dystopia because it's got like no sense of individuality, stuff like that. But then there's like a utopia because it's like, well, actually everybody's employed and like all of the huge benefits to that. Obviously the massive example is my video on mass surveillance, right? Basically, yeah, I think it makes perfect sense to just have everybody being watched all the time. And, you'd say, well, that sounds like a dystopia. But it's like you go there and actually it's just, there's no crime. It's great. And this is obviously another example of, yeah, I feel like people would show up and be like, wait, you got like these dormitories where you're just like trained to be a worker. And they'd be like, that sounds like a dystopia. But then you actually see the people and it's like, hey, I'm a homeowner. I'm like, like 23, 24 years old. I'm a homeowner. I'm well established in a career. I don't have anxiety or I'm not stressed out about like where I am in my life. I do lots of kind of education on the side. All that kind of stuff. Like that people would actually be happy in this society. And yeah, I do think, again, that I do think outside of the typical dystopia, utopia kind of paradigm that lots of people think of. And there's so many instances of kind of like how I view society where people would like typically like, wait, is this it has the dystopian stuff, but then it's got like utopian stuff as well. And to be honest, if you're somebody who watches this and thinks, actually, I don't think there's any utopian elements to this at all, I think this would just be a complete dystopia. Well, then guess what? You now know that, you get the fantastic advantage of, through this YouTube channel, looking into the mindset of somebody who would actually create a dystopia. And maybe next time you watch kind of like a sci-fi film about somebody who creates a dystopia, you can think to yourself, oh, that's not a very realistic character at all. I know what a real I don't know what it was, like a villain who like believes that he's right. A real villain establishing a dystopia would be like, he'd be like King Critical. So yeah, again, if you think that everything I'm saying is complete, just horrible, sounds like your worst nightmare dystopia, then yeah, I am happy to be perhaps even a potential future muse for your dystopian novel villain. Just, yeah, you're welcome.